The giant ship appeared in the sky without warning. It hung over Seoul like a metal cloud. People stopped and looked up. Cars stopped in the streets. The world held its breath. Captain Ta stood on the roof of the military building, looking up with narrow eyes. His hand rested on his gun, though he knew it would do little against something so massive. 25 years in the Korean military had taught him to always be ready, but nothing had prepared him for this. "Sir, we're getting a signal," said his aide, holding out a tablet. The message was simple. "We come in peace. We wish to talk." 3 days later, Captain Tai sat across from the first alien humans had ever met. The alien called itself a Voidari. It looked almost like a tall human with blue-tinted skin and eyes that were too big. It wore what seemed like formal clothes, something between a uniform and fancy robes. "Your species has survived despite your many wars," the Voidari said. Its voice came through a small device that translated its words. "This is rare. Most species destroy themselves before reaching the stars." Ta nodded, keeping his face calm. "We are survivors." The Voidari ambassador looked at the files on the table. "Your weapons are primitive. You still use chemical explosives and metal projectiles." Ta noticed the slight look of disgust on the alien's face. He had seen that look before, on the faces of rich nations' representatives when they visited poorer countries. "We make do with what we have," Ta said. The Voidari smiled. "The Alliance can help you. We can give you clean energy, medicine, food production technology. In return, you will join our alliance and follow our laws." "And what about defense?" Tai asked. "Will you protect Earth?" "Of course. Your world will be under our protection, though we hope you can eventually contribute in small ways." Tai thought about the secret projects hidden deep in mountains and under oceans. He thought about Jin Ho and her work, the things no one outside the highest levels of government knew about. "We would be grateful for your protection," Ta said carefully. Later that day, Ta met with world leaders on a secure video call. The American president, the Chinese premier, and 30 other leaders waited for his report. "They see us as children," Ta said, "primitive and in need of guidance." "Did you tell them about our military capabilities?" asked the Russian president. "No," Ta said. "They showed no interest in our conventional forces. They consider them outdated." The Korean president, who had personally selected Ta for this mission, leaned forward. "What about Project Iron Harvest? Did they detect anything?" Ta shook his head. "Nothing. Their scans seem focused on energy signatures and radioactive materials. Jin Ho's systems use neither." Jin Ho was in the room, standing quietly in the corner. At the mention of her name, the robotics engineer stepped forward into the camera's view. "The Voidari use a type of quantum communication we've never seen before," she said. "But their AI systems are surprisingly linear. They think in straight lines. Predictable. Their robots are just tools, not thinkers." The Chinese premier's voice was sharp. "You learned all this from one meeting?" Jin Ho smiled slightly. "I had help. We had microdrones in the meeting room, the size of dust. They collected data on their technology." Todd watched the faces of the world leaders. Some looked impressed, others worried. "They want us to join their alliance," Ta said. "They've invited me to visit their main fleet as Earth's representative." "Accept," said the Korean president after a moment of silence. "Learn everything you can." As the meeting ended, Ta looked out the window at the massive alien ship hovering above the city. Citizens were going about their day now, already getting used to the strange sight. Jin Ho joined him at the window. "They have no idea what humans are capable of, do they?" Ta shook his head. "No. And for now, that's our advantage." 1 week after first contact, the Voidari wanted to see Earth's weapons. They set up a testing area in a large desert where human militaries could show what they could do. Jin Ho stood under a tent, watching as tanks fired at targets. Fighter jets dropped bombs that made huge explosions. Soldiers showed off guns and missiles, but she could see the Voidari were not impressed. "These weapons use simple explosions," said Ral, the Voidari military leader. "Very basic." Captain Taj stood next to him, face calm. "We work with what we have." Ral nodded. "That is why we classify you as Category 3. You need protection, but cannot help much with defense." Jinho felt her face get hot. She had worked for 15 years creating things these aliens couldn't imagine. And now they looked at Earth's weapons like toys. "May I show you something?" she asked suddenly. To gave her a warning look, but she ignored it. "Of course," said Ral. Jinho opened a small case. Inside was what looked like a toy helicopter the size of her hand. "This is one of our drones," she said. Ral bent down to look, then laughed. "It's very small. What does it do?" "Take pictures." "It can do that," said Jinho. "But it can also think." She tapped a button on her watch. The small drone lifted into the air. It flew around Ral, keeping a perfect distance from him as he moved. "Simple programming," said Ral, not impressed. "It follows movement. Attack pattern 1, Jinho said clearly. The drone suddenly shot forward, then stopped just before hitting Ral's face. It moved back, circled him 3 times, each time at a different height, then returned to Jinho. "It has basic combat moves," said Ral, "but it's too small to carry weapons." "It doesn't need to," said Jinho. 10,000 of these working together can do things you wouldn't believe." 10,000. Ral laughed again. "The power needed would be enormous. And the control system. They don't need much power," Jinho said. "And they control themselves." Ral looked confused. "But then they would all do different things." "Sometimes that's the point," said Jinho with a small smile. Later, in a secure room under the testing area, Tai questioned Jinho. "You shouldn't have shown him the micro-drone," he said. "We agreed to only show old technology. I wanted to see how they would react," Jinho said. "And now we know. They don't understand our approach to AI." Sung, Jinho's research partner, nodded in agreement. He was a quiet man who had worked with Jinho for many years. "Their technology is very advanced," he said, "but their thinking is not flexible. Their machines need central control." Jinho pointed to screens showing data from the meeting. "Their ships, their weapons, even their communication devices, all connected to central systems. Nothing works alone." Tai looked at the data. "This could be important." "It is," said Jinho. "Our ATLAS units work the opposite way. Each one thinks for itself, but also works with others. They would never expect that." Ta looked worried. "The Voidari have labeled us Category 3. That means they think we need protection, but can't help defend ourselves." "Let them think that," said Sung. "It's better if they underestimate us." Jinho walked to a large metal door at the back of the room. She placed her hand on a scanner, and the door opened. Inside was a large robot that looked almost human. It stood 3 meters tall, with armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "This is Atlas," she said, "not just a war robot, but a war thinker. And we have hundreds ready." Ta stared at the machine. "The Voidari have no idea what we're capable of." "And that," said Jinho with a smile, "is exactly how we want it." Captain Ta stood on the bridge of the Voidari command ship. It was his 3rd week in space, learning about the Alliance and its many alien species. The ship was currently near Jupiter, watching over Earth's solar system. "Emergency signal incoming," announced a Voidari officer. The main screen lit up. Another Voidari ship appeared. It was damaged, with parts of it on fire even in the vacuum of space. "We were attacked," said the injured captain on the screen. "The Krell have broken through Defense Line 7. 3 outposts are destroyed." The commander of Ta's ship, an older Voidari named Mav, looked worried. "How many ships?" "At least 50. They didn't follow any known attack pattern. They just swarmed us." Tad listened carefully. The Krell were the enemies of the Alliance. He had heard about them in briefings, but hadn't seen any images until now. On the screen behind the injured captain, he could see one of the attacking ships. It looked like a dark star with sharp points sticking out. Over the next few days, more bad news came in. The Krell were attacking across a wide area, and the Alliance ships couldn't stop them. "I don't understand," said Mav during a private meeting with Ta. "The Krell usually attack in standard formations. We know how to counter them. But now, they're using new tactics. Maybe they learned from past battles," suggested Ta. Mav shook his head. "Krell don't adapt quickly. That's why we've been able to hold them back for so long." An alarm sounded. A young Voidary officer rushed in. "Commander, we've detected a Krell scout ship heading toward Earth." Mav stood quickly. "How long until it arrives?" 3 Earth days. Tai felt his heart beat faster. "We need to warn my people." Mav looked uncomfortable. "Captain Ta, I must be honest. We cannot send enough ships to protect Earth right now. Most of our fleet is fighting the Krell in other sectors. So Earth is on its own." Tai asked. "We can send 2 ships," said Mav. "But a full Krell attack force would need at least 10 to stop." Tai thought quickly. "Let us defend ourselves our way." Mav looked surprised. "With your primitive weapons?" "Yes," said Ta. "We may surprise you." Mav agreed, though he clearly didn't believe Earth could do much against the Krell. Back on Earth, Jin Ho and Sum were in an underground base when they got the call from Ta. "Hostile aliens will reach Earth in 3 days," he explained. "The Alliance can't send enough help." Jin Ho looked at Sung. "Time for Project Iron Harvest." "Are you sure?" asked Sung. "Once we reveal what we can do, there's no going back. If we don't use everything we have, there might not be an Earth to come back to," said Jin Ho. They walked through a large door into a massive underground hangar. Hundreds of Atlas units stood in rows. Behind them were thousands of smaller robots and drones of different sizes. "Activate all units," Jin Ho ordered. "Begin deployment pattern Delta." Around the world, similar bases began to activate. In secret locations under oceans, in mountains, and in deserts, robots and drones powered up and prepared to move. On the Voidary ship, Todd watched as Mav organized the small defense force. "I sent a message to Earth with Krell tactical information," said Mav. "It may help your military prepare, though I fear it won't be enough." "Thank you," said Ta. "But I think you'll find that humans are full of surprises." As he spoke, he received a message from Earth. It was just 2 words from Jin Ho. "We're ready." World leaders gathered in a bunker deep under the Korean mountains. On large screens, they watched as the Krell scout ship entered Earth's solar system. "It will reach Earth in 12 hours, said the American president. "Are we ready?" Jin Ho stood before them. She looked tired after working 3 days without sleep. "Project Iron Harvest is fully activated," she said. "All units are in position." The Russian leader looked doubtful. "The Voidary, with their advanced technology, cannot stop these Krell." "How can we?" Jin Ho nodded to Sung, who pressed a button. The 3D map appeared, showing Earth and thousands of small dots around it. "The Voidary fight like this," Jin Ho explained, making the dots form neat lines and groups. "Organized. Predictable. The Krell have learned to beat this." She pressed another button. The dots scattered, moving in what looked like chaos. "We fight like this. No patterns. No central control. Each unit thinks for itself while working with others. Like a swarm of bees," said the Chinese premier. "More like a pack of wolves," Jin Ho corrected. "Each one smart, but together, smarter." In space, Captain Ta stood on the bridge of the Voidary ship. He watched as the Krell scout approached. "It's scanning Earth," said Mav, the Voidary commander, "looking for defenses." "What will it see?" asked Ta. "Your satellites, your primitive weapons." Mav looked sad. "I'm sorry we couldn't bring more ships." Todd checked his watch. It's fine. You should scan Earth too. Mav looked confused. Why? You might see something interesting. On the main screen, the Krell ship changed course suddenly. It moved faster, heading straight for Earth. It's not just a scout, Mav said with alarm. It's an attack ship. It must have detected your missile launches. Indeed, Earth's nations had launched old missiles toward the Krell ship, but that was just for show. Captain, we're picking up thousands of small objects leaving Earth's atmosphere, reported a Void Area officer. What? Mav rushed to a screen. Those weren't there before. Ta smiled slightly. Project Iron Harvest. Jin-Ho sat at a control center with Sung and 50 other operators. They didn't control the robots directly. They just set goals and monitored results. First wave deployed. Sung reported. Micro-drones approaching Krell ship. On their screens, they watched as 10,000 tiny robots, each the size of a bee, swarmed toward the alien ship. They've detected the micros, an operator called out. The Krell ship fired energy weapons, trying to hit the small drones, but they moved too randomly, changing direction constantly. Phase 2, Jin-Ho ordered. From Earth's oceans, larger drones emerged. From hidden bases, flying robots took off. From underground bunkers, the first Atlas units launched into space. On the Void Area ship, Mav stared at his screens in shock. These weren't in any of our scans. How is this possible? We kept them hidden, said Ta, using materials your scanners can't detect easily. They watched as the human robots surrounded the Krell ship, the micro-drones attached to its hull, finding tiny openings in its armor. What are they doing? Asked Mav. Learning, said Ta. Each drone is scanning and sharing information with the others. The Krell ship fired again and again, but couldn't hit enough of the small targets. Meanwhile, larger human robots approached, using information from the micro-drones to target weak spots. Mav turned to Ta. Your people said you needed our protection. We let you think that, said Ta. Sometimes it's better if others underestimate you. On Earth, Jin-Ho watched the battle with intense focus. Atlas units in position, she said. Beginning main attack now. The Krell ship fired bright beams of energy in all directions. It was trying to hit the small robots that swarmed around it. But for every robot it destroyed, 10 more took its place. Impressive, said Min, a Void Area observer who had joined Ta on the bridge. But the Krell ship has strong shields. Your small robots cannot break through. Todd pointed to the screen. Watch. The micro-drones weren't trying to attack the shields. They were mapping them, finding the spots where they were weakest. This information went to the Atlas units that were now approaching. Jin-Ho's voice came through Ta's communicator. Atlas units engaging now. The Atlas robots were big, almost the size of a small car. They looked human-shaped but with thicker arms and legs. Their black metal bodies seemed to drink in light. 20 Atlas units against a Krell warship. Min shook her head. They will be destroyed. On Earth, Jin-Ho watched through the eyes of her robots. Each Atlas unit had its own AI mind. They didn't need orders from her. They already knew what to do. They're not attacking as a group, reported Sung, looking surprised. Jin-Ho nodded. Each one decided its own best approach. On the screens, they saw the Atlas units split up. Some flew directly at the Krell ship. Others circled around to the back. 2 stayed far away, watching and gathering data. The Krell ship fired at the most obvious targets, the ones coming straight at it. 2 Atlas units were hit and damaged. But they didn't stop. Even damage, they kept going. Self-repair systems working, said an operator. On the Void Area ship, Min watched with growing surprise. Your robots continue to function even when damaged. They adapt, said Ta. If one arm is damaged, they change how they fight. The first Atlas unit reached the Krell ship. Instead of trying to break through the shields with force, it attached itself to a spot where the shields were weakest. Then it began to change shape. "What is it doing?" asked Min. "Creating a doorway," said Ta. The Atlas unit formed a ring with its body. Inside the ring, the Krell ship's shield was being pulled apart, creating a small hole. Immediately, thousands of microdrones flew through this hole and into the Krell ship. In the Korean bunker, world leaders watched in amazement. "The microdrones are inside," Jin Ho announced, mapping the ship's interior and systems. "Can they take control of it?" asked the Korean president. "Better," said Jin Ho. "They can make it think it's in control while actually changing its actions." Back in space, the Krell ship stopped firing at the human robots. It turned away from Earth and began moving back out to space. "It's retreating." Min looked confused. "No," said Ta. "We're controlling it now." The truth was more complex. The microdrones hadn't taken full control. They were simply changing what the ship's sensors reported. The Krell crew thought they were chasing a human ship, but they were actually moving away from Earth. 5 more Atlas units reached the ship and created more holes in the shields. More microdrones entered. "Phase 3, Jin Ho ordered. The remaining Atlas units formed a circle around the Krell ship. They linked their arms, creating a ring of black metal. Energy began to flow between them. "What are they doing now?" Min asked, her voice quiet with shock. "Creating a cage," said Ta. "One the Krell can't escape from." The energy between the Atlas units grew stronger. The Krell ship tried to fire its weapons, but the energy from the ring absorbed each blast. "Impossible," whispered Min. "Your technology. It shouldn't be able to do this." Ta smiled. "That's why we kept it secret." Inside the Krell ship, the confused crew tried everything to break free. But the microdrones were in their systems now, feeding them false information. "We have them," Jin Ho said. "First engagement complete." The world leaders cheered, but Jin Ho didn't join them. She was already preparing for what would come next. "The Krell will send more ships," she said to Sung. This was just the beginning. 3 days after the first attack, Captain Tai was called to meet with the Voidary High Command. He stood in a large room with 7 Voidary leaders sitting at a round table. Min stood next to him as his guide. "Captain Tai," said the oldest Voidary, "we have reviewed the battle data. Your robots performed beyond our expectations." Ta nodded. "Thank you." "We need your help," said another Voidary leader. "The Krell have attacked 3 more outposts. Our ships cannot stop them." Ta had expected this. "What kind of help do you need?" "We want your war robots to join our fleet," said the first Voidary. "We will provide ships to carry them." Ta thought about this. "I need to speak with my government and with the makers of our robots." Back on Earth, Jin Ho and Sung listened to Ta's report. The world leaders were also in the meeting. "They want us to help them fight the Krell," Tai explained. "But they want to put our robots on their ships." Jin Ho frowned. "That could cause problems. Our robots work best when they can make their own decisions. The Voidary might try to control them." "What if we send you with the robots?" suggested the Korean president, "to make sure they are used correctly." Jin Ho and Sung looked at each other. "It could work," said Sung, "and it would give us a chance to learn more about Voidary and Krell technology." The next day, Jin Ho and Sung traveled to space with 50 Atlas units and thousands of smaller robots. They boarded the Voidary command ship where Tai was waiting. "Welcome to space," he said with a smile. Jin Ho looked out a window at the Earth below. "It's beautiful from up here." "The Krell fleet has been spotted," announced Mav, who had been made the commander of this mission. "We will reach them in 2 hours." Jin Ho went to a room the Voidary had prepared for her robots. The Atlas units stood in rows, waiting for orders. But Jin Ho didn't give them specific commands. "New environment, new mission," she told them. "Learn and adapt." The Atlas units' eyes glowed briefly as they processed this. They were already studying the Voidary ship, learning its systems and layout. When the Voidari fleet found the Krell ships, a battle began immediately. The Voidari ships moved in their usual formations, firing powerful weapons. The Krell, having learned from past battles, easily avoided these attacks. "Release the human robots," ordered Mav. Doors opened on the sides of the Voidari ships. Atlas units flew out, followed by smaller drones, but they didn't follow the Voidari battle plan. "What are they doing?" asked Mav, watching as the robots scattered in all directions. "Fighting their way," said Ta. The human robots didn't form lines or groups. Each one moved on its own, seemingly random. But there was a pattern that only became clear when looking at the whole battle. The Atlas units were hurting the Krell ships, pushing them into positions where they were vulnerable. The smaller drones were mapping the Krell defenses, finding weaknesses. "I've never seen anything like this," said Min, who was watching from the command center. Jin-Ho and Sung monitored their robots' progress. They didn't control them directly, just provided guidance when needed. "Atlas Unit 7 has found a weakness in the Krell flagship," reported Sung. Jin-Ho nodded. "Send the data to the other units." Without being told exactly what to do, 3 Atlas units changed course. They approached the Krell flagship from different angles, targeting the weak spot they had just learned about. The Voidari watched in amazement as the human robots worked together without obvious commands. They seemed to understand each other in ways the Voidari couldn't comprehend. "Your robots fight like they have one mind," said Mav to Jin-Ho. "No," she corrected. "They have many minds that work well together. That's better than one mind." As the battle continued, it became clear that the human approach was working. The Krell ships began to retreat, unable to predict or counter the seemingly chaotic movements of the human robots. "We've won this battle," announced Mav. But Jin-Ho shook her head. "We've only won time. The Krell will adapt. They'll learn." "Then we'll need to learn faster," said Tai. After 3 successful battles against the Krell, the Voidari invited Jin-Ho, Sung, and Tai to their main ship for a special meeting. The huge command room was filled with Voidari officers and leaders. "The Alliance thanks you for your help," said the Voidari admiral. "Your robots have changed the war." Jin-Ho nodded politely, but she felt uncomfortable with all the attention. She was used to working in secret labs, not standing before alien leaders. "We would like to understand how your robots work," continued the admiral, "so we can make our ships work better with them." Jin-Ho looked at Ta, who gave a small nod of approval. "Our robots don't work like yours," Jin-Ho began. "Yours follow strict orders and work as one unit. Ours make their own choices while working toward a shared goal." A Voidari scientist stepped forward. "But how can they fight effectively if they all do different things?" "That's exactly why they work," said Jin-Ho. "The enemy can't predict what they'll do next." Sung opened a small device that showed a 3D model of Earth. "On our planet," he explained, "we fought many wars against each other. Often, a smaller force beat a larger one by using surprise and quick changes. Guerrilla warfare," added Ta. "Our history taught us that sometimes chaos is more powerful than order." The Voidari looked confused. Their society was built on order and rules. The idea of using chaos as a tool was strange to them. Min, who had become their friend, tried to help. "The Voidari have been united for thousands of years. We forgot how to fight in the old ways." "Can you teach us?" asked the admiral. Jin-Ho thought about this. "We can try. But first, we need to learn more about you, and you need to learn more about us." Over the next few days, Jin-Ho and Sung spent time with Voidari engineers. They showed them how human robots learned and adapted. In return, the Voidari showed them their advanced energy systems and materials. "Your robots learn from each mistake," said a Voidari engineer with amazement. "They never make the same error twice." "And they share what they learn with each other," added Jin-Ho. "One robot's experience becomes everyone's knowledge." Ta spent his time with Voidari military leaders, explaining human battle tactics. He used examples from Earth's history to show how smaller forces could defeat larger ones by being unpredictable. In your last battle, he explained, your ships moved in the same pattern you've used for 100 years. The Krell knew exactly what you would do. But patterns and order make us strong, argued a Voidari commander. They also make you predictable, said Ta. One evening, Jin Ho found Min looking at an Atlas unit in the ship's lab. The robot stood still, but its eyes glowed as it watched Min. It's studying me, said Min, learning about Voidari. Jin Ho nodded. All our robots are collecting data about your people and ships. It helps them work better with you. Do they also collect data about the Krell? Everything they can find, said Jin Ho. Every battle teaches them something new. Min looked troubled. The Krell are also learning. Our scouts report they've changed their ships and tactics. Jin Ho had expected this. That's why we keep changing too. It's like a game where the rules keep changing. A game. Min seemed shocked. This is war. On Earth, some of our best military thinkers learned from games. Jin Ho explained. Games teach you to think many steps ahead and to expect the unexpected. Min thought about this. Perhaps we've been fighting wars wrong all this time. Jin Ho put a hand on Min's shoulder. Not wrong, just differently. Now we need to combine our ways. Your technology and our thinking. As they talked, an alarm sounded throughout the ship. The Voidari Admiral's voice came over the speakers. All personnel to battle stations. The Krell main fleet has been spotted. They're heading for the Alliance headquarters. Jin Ho and Min looked at each other. This was what they had been preparing for. Time to see if our cultural exchange has worked, said Jin Ho. The Alliance headquarters was a massive space station near a bright blue star. 50 Voidari ships formed a line in front of it. Behind them, the human robots waited. Krell fleet approaching, announced a Voidari officer. 100 ships. Their largest attack force ever. The Admiral looked at Ta, Jin Ho, and Sung. Your robots know what to do. Jin Ho nodded. They've been planning since we got the alert. Each unit has its own mission, but they all work toward the same goal. Which is? Asked the Admiral. To end this war today, said Ta. The Krell ships came into view on the main screen. They looked different from before. Their shapes had changed, and they moved in new patterns. They've adapted, said Min. They're not using their old tactics. Jin Ho smiled slightly. Good. We hoped they would. This confused the Voidari. You wanted them to change, asked Min. We wanted them to think they needed to change, explained Sung. It means they're afraid of our robots. The battle began with the Krell firing long-range weapons. The Voidari ships returned fire, but stayed in their positions, protecting the station. Release the human units, ordered the Admiral. The Atlas units and smaller drones moved forward, but instead of attacking directly, they split into 3 groups. Jin Ho, watching from the command center, nodded with approval. They've chosen Plan Delta. What is Plan Delta? Asked Min. Watch and see, said Jin Ho. The first group of robots flew straight toward the Krell. They drew enemy fire, and several were destroyed. But they kept going, pushing deeper into the Krell formation. The second group circled around, moving behind the Krell fleet. They stayed far away, not engaging directly. The third group, mostly microdrones, spread out and disappeared from view. Your robots are too scattered, said the Admiral with concern. They need to concentrate their forces. That's old thinking, said Ta. Watch what happens next. The first group of Atlas units reached the center of the Krell fleet. Suddenly, they exploded in bright flashes of light. The light wasn't from weapons. It was from their power cores. You sacrificed them, asked Min, shocked. They sacrificed themselves, corrected Jin Ho. Each one made its own choice. The explosions created confusion in the Krell fleet. Their ships lost formation, trying to avoid the blasts. Then the second group made their move. They targeted specific Krell ships, not the biggest ones, but smaller ships that seemed less important. "Why are they attacking those ships?" asked the admiral. "Command ships," said Sung. "The Atlas units identify them by analyzing how the Krell fleet moves. Those small ships are giving the orders." The Voidari were amazed. They had fought the Krell for decades but never realized the fleet was controlled from smaller vessels. Meanwhile, the microdrones had reached the Krell ships. They attached to hulls, entered through small openings, and began to disrupt systems from inside. "The Krell ships are losing power," reported a Voidari officer. "Their weapons are shutting down." Jinho nodded. Phase 2 complete. The remaining HLS units now moved in, targeting the confused and weakened Krell ships. But they didn't try to destroy them all. "They're hurting them," observed Min, pushing them away from the station and into a trap. The trap was a web of energy created by special drones that Jinho had designed. As the Krell ships were forced into this web, their engines failed. "We have them," said the admiral. "Victory is ours." But Ta shook his head. "Not yet. Look." One massive Krell ship had broken through. It was heading straight for the station, its weapons charging. "All Voidari ships, intercept," ordered the admiral. "Wait," said Jinho. "Let the Atlas units handle it." 3 Atlas units that had been held in reserve now flew toward the last Krell ship. They moved in perfect coordination, like they had practiced this exact scenario. "What are they doing?" asked Min. "Something new," said Jinho. "Something they created themselves." Everyone watched as the 3 Atlas units approached the final Krell ship. It was twice the size of any Voidari vessel and still had working weapons. "They'll be destroyed," whispered Min. But the Atlas units didn't attack directly. Instead, they began to orbit the Krell ship at high speed, creating a ring around it. As they moved, they released small devices that floated in space. "What are those?" asked the admiral. "I don't know," said Jinho. "This wasn't in any plan we discussed." The small devices suddenly activated, creating a web of light between them. The web wrapped around the Krell ship, becoming tighter and tighter. "They're using the Krell's own energy against them," said Sung, who was looking at data from the battle. "Every time the Krell ship fires its weapons, the web absorbs the energy and gets stronger." The Krell ship tried to break free, firing all its weapons. But this only made the web tighter. Finally, the ship stopped moving. Its lights went out. "They shut down their systems," reported a Voidari officer. "They're surrendering." A cheer went up in the command center. The war that had raged for decades was over in a single day. Later, in a grand hall on the Alliance station, the Voidari High Council held a ceremony to thank the humans. "Today marks a new chapter in Alliance history," said the head of the council. "Humans have proven themselves to be not just allies, but teachers." Captain Tai, Jinho, and Sung stood before the council, representing Earth. "We officially change Earth's status from Category 3 to Category 1, continued the council head. "Humans are now full partners in the Alliance, with all rights and privileges." Jinho stepped forward. "We thank you for this honor, but we didn't win this war alone. We won it together, each contributing what we do best." The council head nodded. "This is true, and it has taught us an important lesson about different ways of thinking." After the ceremony, Jinho found Min looking at the captured Krell ship through a viewing window. "What will happen to them?" asked Jinho. "They will be taken to a secure system," said Min. "We hope to make peace with them someday." Jinho watched as Atlas units worked around the ship, studying it. "Your robots are still learning," observed Min. "They never stop," said Jinho. "That's what makes them special." Min turned to face her. "I have a request from the council. They want to create a new academy where Voidari and humans can learn from each other. They want you and Sung to help build it." Jinho thought about this. An exchange of ideas. "I like that." Captain Ta joined them, looking tired but happy. "I just spoke with Earth," he said. "They're very pleased with the outcome." "What happens now?" asked Min. Now we build, not just fight, said Ta. The Alliance has offered to help us develop our space technology. In return, we'll help them think differently about problems. As they talked, an Atlas unit approached them. It had been damaged in the battle, with one arm missing and burn marks on its chest, but it still moved smoothly. Unit A7 reporting, it said in a mechanical voice. Request permission to implement new defense system based on battle data. Jin-Ho smiled, already planning for the next challenge. Always, replied the robot. Safety requires constant improvement. Min stared at the robot with new respect. It thinks about the future. They all do, said Jin-Ho. That's what we built them for, not just to win today's battle, but to prevent tomorrow's. As they looked out at the stars, Tai thought about how far they had come. From a small planet that the Alliance had seen as primitive to key partners in the greatest victory in recent history. The Voidary thought they were teaching us about the universe, he said quietly. But we ended up teaching them something just as valuable. What's that? Asked Min. That sometimes, said Tai, the most powerful weapon isn't the most advanced technology. It's a new way of thinking.